Well, hello, Bethel United Methodist Church family and friends. It's good to be with you in the middle of the week. Thank you for the conversation that we continue to have. My hope in between Sundays is to share with you a bit of what's going on in my own thought and heart and life, in the hopes that it gives us a way to think together about where we find ourselves now in the 8th week of this pandemic. Dallas Willard is a writer, author, professor, died several years ago, but wrote a lot about Christian formation, about our spiritual lives and our practices that shape the way we form our faith. One of the quotes of his that I really like is that Dallas says, "God's address is at the end of our rope." God's address is at the end of our rope. I really like that, because if you're like me, there have been times along these past 8 weeks where we wanted to do, or I wanted to do, things the way that felt most comfortable, that the world was ordered in a way that I was used to, and as the weeks have gone by, I was just, like, I've had it with this quarantine, I've had it with online worship, or I've had it with any number of things. End of our rope kind of moments. Maybe you've had them too. But then I remember those wise words, God's address is at the end of our rope, which I think is a way of saying that even when we feel like we're at the end of our rope, like we're just hanging on, where we can't do what we want or do it the way we want or have the kind of control about our life that we want to have. When we're at a place that we've got to surrender, there's a net of grace under us. That there's no place we can go, no thing we can do, no where we can be, that we're beyond the net of God's grace. We're not hanging over a cliff. We're hanging over a net of grace. This image helps me a little bit too. If you think about we who were created in the image of God, a loving God, whose nature is to give and bless and sustain, we're in the center of this circle, and we have the ability with our choices to move in any direction, out from 360 degrees any way we want. We can act in ways that are in keeping with God's will. We can use our resources of hands and heart and voice to bless or to hurt. We can use our words to encourage, or our words to cast judgment. We can use our hands to embrace, or our hands to hit. We can come out of the circle in any direction. But beyond our circle, there's an additional circle. And that circle is the grace of God. Love, because it's never coercive. Control and love can't go together. We are free to make the decisions that we do in any direction outside of our circle. But beyond our circle, there is a circle of God's grace, which, in the witness of our library of Scripture, shows that time and time again we make our choices, or we make our responses to whatever comes our way that may even be beyond our control, like a pandemic. We respond, react to that. But beyond our own choices, there's God's grace, and time again, God takes what looks to us like, what can you do with this? What good will come out of this? And in the alchemy of God's grace and mercy, God has the ability to bring good out of the things that are in the moment. Struggles, aches, longings, losses. In the alchemy of God's mercy and grace, there's the ability for something good to come. I think of Genesis 50, story of Joseph and his brothers. Started out with betrayal and selling their brother into slavery. 20 years pass. The storyline unfolds really for the last part of the book of Genesis. But in the 50th chapter, the last chapter, Joseph, 20 years later, sees his brothers. He has been sold into slavery, but has used his gifts for good, has risen in the power structure of the Pharaoh, and now has the ability to bless his brothers with grain, or with hope. And he says to them, what you did, you intended it for evil, selling me into slavery, but God has used it for good. Do you hear that redemptive quality that lives beyond our circle into a larger circle? That's the beyond the rope. That's the second circle grace of God. So I think that's where we are now in these moments of pandemic, in these moments of the emerging new, where God is that alchemist that is using the stuff that is hard and challenging and difficult, but in the alchemy of God's grace, there is something that will be used for good. I see four things that I would remind us of when I think about our life together as Bethel United Methodist Church. One, I don't think that there's going to be a light switch that's just going to come on and then we all kind of reset back to what we enjoyed before this global pandemic began. As much as that is a comfort, I think that that we'll have this unfolding where we will slowly take steps towards a safe return. I think we often think about that in terms of our senior adults, that we want to protect anybody who may have maybe in a risk category of underlying health issues or anything like that. But one of the signatures of Bethel is that we are an intergenerational church. We have a treasure trove of young families and lots of children. And we will come back when we can not only make sure it is safe for our seniors, but we'll make sure it's safe for our children. We have to think about ways. Certainly a room full of preschoolers are not amenable to social distancing. So we will have to think creatively about what this looks like as we make our way towards a safe return. Which leads me to remind ourselves that we are now in an adaptive place of leadership. I think so often if we had two choices of adaptive leadership, which doesn't really have a straight arrow path, or a strategic plan that had check 1, check 2, check 3, check 4, we'd go that route. But that route is not available to us now. We certainly can plan, and we will. But there is a sense that we would never have imagined in the beginning of March that we would not be together on April the 12th for Easter. And we adapted. Schools are planning to be back for fall, with the caveat that there may be distance learning, because we can plan, but we have to adapt. There's an ebb and flow to this season that we're in, which puts some of us who like order and a bit of control, a bit of, our type A-ness comes out, and we have to be, the A now is for adaptability. We're going to have to be adaptive with the ebb and flow of this. So the third thing is that I think that in this season of adaptability, this season of unfolding, we are proving ourselves creative and resilient. We are still feeding families Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at our food pantry. We are still supporting Epworth Children's Home through our Mother's Day offering. We are still sending hard copies to our seniors who may not be online and receiving email. We are doing chalk drawings on the driveways of our youth. We are doing drive-bys, delivering Vacation Bible School supplies and waving from the porch to our children. We're having Zoom Bible studies. We're finding ways to be creative and resilient. And fourth, though we are physically distanced, we are still connected. In all those ways that I just mentioned and more. I think about 2 stories that I've heard this week about people who have not been to Bethel, active in the life of the church for a while. Life has come and gone, they've had losses and moves and life changes. But in this era, when our chapel class, our young adult, young family class, has taken names and begun to call people every week, sort of taken their desire to be connected intergenerationally, new friendships have formed. People have begun to feel connected to Bethel, though they have not even walked through the doors of the sanctuary. Because it's really about our connection of love. How we reach out as the hands and feet of Christ. I'm thinking about people who are finding ways to stay connected in loving, hopeful, encouraging ways, even when we cannot come to the physical place called the church. We are still being the church. These are all very encouraging things to me along the way, and I am encouraged by this God whose address is the end of our rope, God whose circle of grace extends beyond our own. And I am hopeful that in the days that are unfolding, as we give thoughtful, prayerful consideration to safe ways to make our way back to this sacred space, that we'll trust that in the meantime, in this slow, steady, thoughtful, prayerful unfolding, that God, the great alchemist, with mercy and grace, is working for good, even here and even now. I look forward to seeing you again on Sunday. Until then, know that my love and prayers are with you.